The entire ballroom went silent after those words. Not loud silent. The dangerous kind. The kind where people stop chewing and suddenly remember every cruel thing they said 5 seconds earlier. My brother Tyler still had his hand clamped around my elbow when he laughed nervously beside me. "Sir, trust me, there's nothing impressive here. My sister barely keeps her life together." My mother forced a smile. "We usually avoid family stories about her." I wanted the marble floor to split open beneath me. My name is Vanessa Hale, and by 32, I had perfected invisibility. I worked night shifts at a small roadside diner outside Phoenix, rented a studio apartment with broken air conditioning, and spent most holidays pretending my family's comments didn't cut straight through me anymore. Tyler hated that I never defended myself. My parents hated that I embarrassed their carefully polished image. Bringing me to this engagement party felt less like inclusion and more like public entertainment. But none of that explained the look on Richard Whitmore's face. The billionaire standing beside the champagne tower stared at me like he had seen a ghost walk into his home. Then he quietly asked me one question. "Vanessa, where did you get that necklace?" Every muscle in my body locked. My hand moved instinctively toward the thin silver necklace resting against my collarbone. I had worn it almost every day since I was 16. A small oval pendant, tarnished around the edges. Nothing expensive. Tyler snorted beside me, probably from a gas station. A few people laughed softly. Richard Whitmore ignored them completely. His eyes stayed fixed on the pendant like the room had disappeared around us. "It belonged to my grandmother," I answered carefully. "Why?" My mother immediately stepped in. "Vanessa makes everything sound dramatic. She bought that thing years ago at some pawn shop." I opened my mouth, then stopped. That was not true. The necklace had arrived in a sealed envelope after my grandmother Eleanor died. No note. No explanation. Just my name written across the front in shaky handwriting. Richard's face strained of color. "May I see it?" he asked. The room shifted awkwardly. Even Tyler looked uncomfortable now. I unclasped the necklace slowly and handed it over. Richard turned the pendant over in his palm. His thumb brushed something hidden near the clasp. Then the pendant clicked open. Inside was a tiny faded photograph. A younger Richard Whitmore stood beside my grandmother. And wrapped around his finger was the exact same ring my mother wore every single day. My mother lunged forward so fast her champagne glass tipped across the tablecloth. "Give that back," she snapped. Not asked. Snapped. Richard Whitmore looked at her with cold recognition now, like puzzle pieces were locking together inside his head. "You told me it was destroyed." The blood drained from my mother's face. Tyler frowned between them. "Mom, what's happening?" "No idea," she answered too quickly. I had heard that tone before. It was the voice she used whenever truth got too close to the surface. Richard carefully closed the pendant and handed it back to me without breaking eye contact with her. "Eleanor said she would leave this to their right granddaughter someday." Granddaughter. The word hit strangely. My father stepped beside my mother, jaw tight. "Sir, I think there's been some misunderstanding. Vanessa isn't really part of these conversations." Richard's expression hardened instantly. "That's interesting, because 28 years ago your wife begged me never to contact her family again." The air vanished from my lungs. Tyler stared at our mother. "What is he talking about?" She looked trapped now. Angry. Cornered. My father suddenly grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. "We're leaving." But Richard spoke again before we could move. "No," he said quietly. "Vanessa deserves to hear why her mother stole someone else's child." My knees nearly gave out beneath me. Tyler actually laughed once, short and confused, waiting for somebody to call it a joke. Nobody did. My mother's eyes filled with panic. "Richard, stop." He ignored her completely. 30 years of wealth and control sat behind his voice, but underneath it was something uglier tonight. Regret. "When Eleanor worked for my family," he said carefully, "your mother was pregnant at the same time as my wife. Both babies were born early during a power outage at St. Mary's Hospital." My father shouted, "Enough." Richard kept going. "My daughter died 3 days later." The ballroom had gone completely still now. Even the musicians stopped playing. I felt sick. Richard looked directly at me. Eleanor believed the hospital mixed records during the evacuation. She spent years trying to prove it. My mother grabbed my wrist. Her nails dug painfully into my skin. "We are leaving right now." I pulled away from her for the first time in my life. "No," I whispered. Richard reached slowly into his suit pocket and removed a folded document. Old, creased, protected inside plastic. "I hired investigators after Eleanor died," he said. "Last month they finally found the original maternity records." Tyler stared at the papers. "Mom." She started crying before Richard even handed them to me. And deep down, I already knew why. My hands shook so badly, I could barely unfold the records. 2 names appeared beside matching hospital identification numbers. Margaret Whitmore. Linda Hale. Then farther down the page, handwritten corrections covered in faded ink. Infant tags possibly switched during emergency transfer. I read the sentence 3 times. My mother kept crying quietly beside me, but nobody moved to comfort her anymore. Tyler looked horrified. My father looked furious that the secret had escaped instead of guilty for hiding it. Richard's voice lowered. "Eleanor suspected your mother discovered the mistake first." I looked up slowly. "What mistake?" His jaw tightened painfully. "That the Whitmore baby survived. And hers did not." The room tilted around me. "No," my mother whispered immediately. "That is not what happened." But she would not look at me. Richard stepped closer. "Eleanor confronted her once. Your mother denied everything. A week later, Eleanor disappeared from our estate permanently." My stomach twisted violently. Every childhood memory suddenly felt wrong. Every cold birthday. Every family photo, where I stood slightly outside the frame. Every time my mother called me difficult while worshipping Tyler like he carried the family name alone. I finally understood why I had spent my entire life feeling borrowed. Tyler stared at our mother with tears building in his eyes. "Tell me he's lying." She opened her mouth. Then another voice answered from behind us. "He isn't." An elderly woman stood near the ballroom entrance gripping a silver cane. I recognized her immediately. Judge Miriam Keller. She had been one of Phoenix's most respected family court judges before retirement. I used to serve her coffee during my diner shifts every Thursday morning. Quiet woman. Sharp eyes. Always tipped exactly $20. Tonight, she looked exhausted. My mother went completely pale. "You promised this would stay buried." Miriam ignored her and walked directly toward me. "I'm sorry, Vanessa," she said softly. "I tried convincing your grandmother to tell you before she died." My throat burned. "You knew?" She nodded once. "When Eleanor became ill, she asked me to hold sealed affidavits in case Richard's investigators ever confirmed the records." Tyler backed away from our parents like strangers had replaced them in front of him. My father finally exploded. "This is insane. We raised her. We gave her a home." "A home?" Tyler shouted suddenly. "You treated her like garbage." The words cracked across the ballroom. Nobody disagreed. Miriam carefully removed a thick envelope from her bag and handed it to me. "Your grandmother wanted you to decide what happened next." Inside were signed witness statements, hospital logs, private investigator reports, and one final handwritten letter from Eleanor. My vision blurred while I read the first sentence. "Vanessa, if you are reading this, it means your mother chose herself again instead of choosing you." I could barely breathe while reading Eleanor's letter. She described everything. The hospital chaos. The broken identification system. My mother overhearing a nurse mention the Whitmore fortune before realizing one infant had died during the evacuation. Eleanor caught her switching bassinets hours later. But by then, panic had already spread through the hospital. Records disappeared. Witnesses contradicted each other. And my mother threatened to accuse Eleanor of lying unless she stayed silent. One sentence nearly destroyed me. "I watched your mother hold you differently after that night. Not lovingly. Fearfully." Tears burned down my face before I noticed them. Across the ballroom, my mother finally stopped pretending. "You think I had choices?" she screamed. "We were drowning in debt. Richard Whitmore's daughter would have everything." Richard stared at her with disgust. "So you stole a child?" I saved her, my mother shot back. No, I said quietly. Everybody turned toward me. For the first time in my life, my voice did not shake. You saved yourself. Silence swallowed the room again. My father looked beaten now. Tyler looked physically sick. Then Richard slowly stepped closer and asked the question that terrified me more than the truth itself. Vanessa, if you want it, I would like the chance to know my daughter. Nobody spoke after that. The ballroom lights suddenly felt too bright, exposing every ugly thing my family spent decades hiding. My mother stood frozen beside my father, realizing the story she built her entire life around had finally collapsed in public. I looked at Richard Whitmore for a long moment. This man shared my blood, but blood alone meant nothing to me anymore. I had spent 32 years learning how to survive without kindness, without protection, without being chosen first by anybody. You don't get to buy a relationship with me, I told him quietly. Richard nodded immediately. I know. And strangely, that answer mattered. Tyler walked toward me slowly, tears running down his face. Vanessa, I didn't know. I know, I whispered back. But my mother did know. Every insult, every humiliation, every holiday where she introduced me like an obligation instead of her daughter suddenly looked intentional now. She never hated me because I failed her. She hated me because I reminded her what she did. 2 months later, criminal investigations reopened around St. Mary's missing records. My parents became national headlines. Tyler cut contact completely. And me? I took Eleanor's necklace, left Phoenix forever, and never looked back.